How would you like a 15% discount to my daily email, the stack of stuff, the show notes, discounts to the conference, all of that? All you need to do is text the word show to 33777. You'll get the annual subscription with a 15% discount to my daily email. You'll get the stack of stuff, the links to the show notes, discounts to the conference, and so much more. All you have to do is text the word show, SHOW, to 33777. Text show to 33777.
Welcome to the Eric Erickson Show podcast, Hour 2.
Hello there. It is Eric Erickson here across the United States. The phone number is 877-973-7425. Should you wish to be on the program, I would be delighted to have you. There's a story about Marjorie Taylor Greene in NBC News about her standing up to the Republican Party. I mean, she's transitioning to a Democrat, but there's actually something larger here. Let me just read you part of this, and I realize it's NBC, but there's a point here, and remember, she stirred the anti-Semitism pot yesterday on October 7th. When the White House discouraged Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene from launching a Senate bid in Georgia this year, Greene agreed to back off her statewide ambitions. I actually wish she would have run. Nonetheless, that doesn't mean the firebrand Republican was going to back down from other fights she felt were worth waging, including within her own party. Over the past 6 months, Greene has made waves in Washington for publicly breaking with Trump and the GOP on a number of high-profile issues and lobbying some pointed attacks at her fellow Republicans in the process. She was critical of the Trump administration's strikes on Iran, referred to the situation in Gaza as a genocide, signed her name to an effort to force a House vote on requiring the Justice Department to release the Epstein files, sided with Democrats in calling for an extension of the Affordable Care Act subsidies. She says, I'm not some sort of blind slave to the president. I don't think anyone should be. I serve in Congress. We're a separate branch of government, and I'm not elected by the president. I'm not elected by anybody that works in the White House. I'm elected by my district. That's who I work for. Listen, I know her district, and I don't think they want to expand Obamacare, and that's what Marjorie Taylor Greene wants to do with the Democrats is expand Obamacare. I know the people in her district. They're not anti-Semites. Marjorie Taylor Greene is. In fact, I know a number of people in Marjorie Taylor Greene's district who have to use Barry Loudermilk's office for constituent services because Greene's office is terrible at constituent service. She's great at getting attention for herself. She's actually bad at being a congresswoman. Those of you outside of Georgia probably don't know this, but inside Georgia, it's well known that if you're a business in Marjorie Taylor Greene's district and you need something from Washington for your business, you've got to go to Barry Loudermilk or Rich McCormick or one of the other members of Congress around her district because she's terrible constituent services. Her entire staff is mobilized to get her attention, not to actually work with the constituents of her district. And the way she's getting attention right now is to stand up to Donald Trump on a host of issues. Let's just be real honest here. What's going on? Marjorie Taylor Greene is a political opportunist and an anti-Semite who is a not great congresswoman whose constituents have to go to other congressmen in Georgia to get work done if they need constituent help because she's too busy getting attention for herself. But Marjorie Taylor Greene, being an opportunist, sees opportunity here. Now, just for perspective, just so you understand, Marjorie Taylor Greene, when she first ran for Congress, was going to run in Georgia's 6th congressional district against Karen Handel, who had been a congresswoman and was running again, having lost in an election. She was going to run again, and Marjorie Taylor Greene was pivoting herself as a reasonably moderate suburban Republican. And then the 11th district came up, or whichever district it was, she decided to run in. Tom Graves had been the congressman there, and she decided to run as a firebrand conservative. Instead, she pivoted from being a more moderate centrist Republican to a firebrand conservative. She doesn't really have any core-defining principles other than promotion of herself. The reason Marjorie Taylor Greene is doing what she's doing, though, is a signal to the rest of the party. Not that she wants to become a Democrat, although I think she probably does, but that Donald Trump is becoming a lame duck. Every president becomes a lame duck. It's inevitable. The president is term limited. He can stir the pot on 2028, but he's going to be too old anyway. Even if he wanted to run, he couldn't. He's precluded by the Constitution. There are lots of people on the right who love to read the Constitution creatively when it comes to Donald Trump getting a third term, but I can assure you Donald Trump cannot do it. And before you pick up the phone, Boomer, and call me and say, well, he could become J.D. Vance's vice president and Vance could resign and he could become president again. No, sorry, Bob. They thought of that one. You might not have, but the people who wrote the amendment to term limit the presidency. Listen, I don't mean to pick on those of you older than me, but it is inevitably, I will be at a conference, I'll be speaking somewhere, and someone in their 60s or 70s comes up, and it's like they had this profound idea no one in the entire world has ever had before, and that's, why don't you do this in making vice president? The Republicans wanted to do it to Ronald Reagan in 1988. And the lawyer said, no, sirree, Bob, you can't do it. Why? Because the way the Constitution works is a president can only serve 2 terms. And the vice president of the United States must meet the qualifications for president of the United States. So if you want to be vice president, you got to meet the qualifications of president. The president can only serve 2 terms. Therefore, the vice president of the United States who has served 2 terms as president is disqualified from being president of the United States. They literally thought about that when they were writing the amendment. So he's gone after this term. We're in the run-up to the midterms. Usually lame duck status doesn't really start until after the midterms, but it's starting with Trump. And the early warning indicators, Marjorie Taylor Greene's defiance. She doesn't care. She intends to outlast Donald Trump. And she's charting a post-Trump future. Remember one of her arrogant little tweets when she was disagreeing on Israel and bombing Iran was that I'm MAGA. In her comfortable shoes, Marjorie Taylor Greene, keyboard warrior, took to the internet to declare, I am MAGA. Not Trump, her. In her singular egotistical fashion, she declared she is MAGA. She sees what's coming. The vacuum. In the history of populist movements, when the populist, charismatic figure leaves the stage, the movement collapses. In every major populist movement around the world, when the populist leader goes away, the movement splinters and collapses. Marjorie Taylor Greene isn't a dumb person. She just plays one on TV. She sees where this is headed. After Donald Trump leaves, J.D. Vance may be able to hold on to the movement for a little while. But J.D. Vance is not Donald Trump. He's a charismatic politician in his own right. He's smart as a whip. But he's not Trump. There actually is a historic tie-in here, and that is Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan was a conservative, but he was a populist conservative. And Ronald Reagan talked about using his conservative values to push populist issues in a conservative direction. He was very canny this way. And while there are lots of mythologies by progressives that he was struggling with Alzheimer's at the end of his administration, you can actually put up a montage of Ronald Reagan engaging with the press in January of 1989 before he left office, and Joe Biden, and there's no comparison. Reagan is coherent, sharp, making jokes, knows the people in the room without prompting. Joe Biden is like, no comparison. And a lot of people on the right, because Reagan had over 50% popularity, and George H.W. Bush, by design, cast his first term as Ronald Reagan's third term. only when George H.W. Bush began to stretch his legs as his own man did people, particularly Republicans, turn on him. It turned out he wasn't Reagan's third term. He was betraying the Reagan tax-cutting legacy and raising taxes, and it was game over for George H.W. Bush. J.D. Vance or Marco Rubio or whoever, I saw the Daily Mail has this thing that Ted Cruz is quietly talking to donors about maybe he's got a shot in 2028, that there will be a splintered populist wing of the party between Rubio and Vance, and he could consolidate conservatives. I don't know that that's true or not. But I think Marjorie Taylor Greene understands she intends to stay after Donald Trump leaves, and she's beginning to chart her own path. Now, it's an insane anti-Semitic path. It's out of line with the voters of her district. I know those people. They're good, hardworking Americans, and they do not hate Jews. They love Israel. They're pro-Israel. They don't want Obamacare expanded. She's out of step with her district. She benefits from a degree to a media vacuum there. She gets on television, rabble-rousing, and nobody pays attention to the fact that she's now siding with the Democrats to expand Obamacare. But she's charting a path forward because Donald Trump's a lame duck. Now, there's a way for Donald Trump to assert himself right now before the midterms. Trump could absolutely assert himself. Trump could go find someone in Marjorie Taylor Greene's district and endorse that person to run against Marjorie. He would have a massive fundraising pool because Jewish donors around America, they sure would. And Marjorie would go absolutely insane attacking Jews and become a vile anti-Semite, which would just spur on others. But Trump could go find someone and use Marjorie as an example. He's not going to do that, though. He still likes her. The White House hates her, by the way. The people in the White House do not like Marjorie Taylor Greene. They think she's a bully. They think she's rude. But the president's not going to primary her. But the president may want to reconsider that because otherwise she's calling his bluff. He's a lame duck now. He can't do anything to her. He's a lame duck because he can't run anymore. He has clout to shape the upcoming midterm election cycle. And that's it. And when the midterms are over, the conversation turns to 2028 and who will replace him. And he wants J.D. Vance. He's already made that clear. He said nice things about Rubio, but he's talked up Vance a lot. Vance needs to study up on George H.W. Bush because George H.W. Bush embraced the idea of being the legacy of Ronald Reagan. Bush never was, but J.D. Vance was. J.D. Vance at one point was with me defined as a never Trumper. We both changed our minds. But Vance is not necessarily ideologically aligned perfectly with Trump in the same way George H.W. Bush was a moderate establishment Republican, but he got on board the Reagan agenda and rode it to his own reelection, where he then decided to strut his stuff and be his own man and collapse the house of cards of the populist movement that Reagan built within the Republican Party. This could happen too, and Marjorie Taylor Greene is smart enough to see and know that populist movements tend to fracture over time when the big guy leaves, and Donald Trump, whether y'all like it or not, is going to leave in 2029. January 20th, 2029 will be his last day in office and the first day in office of his successor in office. At noon on that day, they will slide the football from one guy to the next. That is the briefcase with the nuclear codes. You can actually watch it happen on stage as the man subtly shifts his seat from one president to the next and moves the briefcase with him. It's the transition of power. Happens every time there's a new president. At noon on January 20th, of that odd-numbered year after a presidential election. And what will become of MAGA? Marjorie Taylor Greene wants to rebuild, I guess, part of the Ron Paul coalition, fill it with the anti-Semites, except where Ron Paul hated government, Marjorie Taylor Greene wants to expand Obamacare. It's only going to get worse for Donald Trump. He's becoming a lame duck. The only way for Donald Trump to forestall his decline in power within the Republican Party is to crack down now on those within Congress who would choose to chart a new path right now before he's out of the door. Lame duck status is inevitable. It happens to every single president of the United States. The question is when it begins to happen. And Marjorie Taylor Greene is an early warning indicator for Donald Trump. He doesn't have much time left to be the leader of the Republican Party, and he can extend it, but he'd have to make an example of her, and he's not going to do it. Boll & Branch kindly sent me a new set of king-size sheets, and I'm happy to get them, but I'll tell you the truth, I've already got Boll & Branch sheets that I've had for about a decade. They are so soft now. They haven't frayed. They haven't worn out. They've just gotten really soft. They're made of the highest quality, 100% organic cotton. They're very durable, and right now they've got limited edition fall colors for a deeply comforting bedroom. And they come with the 30-night worry-free guarantee. And I'm telling you, the more you wash them, the softer they get, and they don't wear out. I've had my set of Boll & Branch sheets for almost a decade. You can start building your sanctuary of comfort this fall with Boll & Branch. For a limited time, get 20% off your first set of sheets, plus free shipping at bollandbranch.com/Eric. That's Boll & Branch, BOLLAND branch.com/Eric, ERICK. Save 20%, unlock free shippings, exclusions apply, and you get those great fall colors right now. Hello and welcome. It is Eric Erickson here. Let's see if I can take Jose's phone call from Jacksonville real quick. Welcome, sir. How are you?
Hey, how are you today?
Great.
I had a quick question. I apologize. I'm sure you covered it before, but I do look to you for education while I'm eating lunch. I have 2 kids in the military, worried to death about how they're going to pay their rent next month. And I wanted to take your take on how that is possible in the United States of America to not pay military personnel while the politicians are playing games in Washington. Thank you.
Yeah, well, okay, Jose, listen, pay for the military went out this past week, so that one got taken care of. It was funded. The next pay period for the military is going to be next Friday, not this coming Friday, but next Friday, and there will be no paycheck coming unless the Democrats reopen the government, which probably isn't going to happen. So where does this go forward? Until it's reopened, they don't get their pay. Once it's reopened, they get their back pay. A lot of landlords and others accommodate military and federal employee tenants during government shutdowns. Banks allow waivers for mortgage payments. Car loan companies tend to allow waivers. You have to provide them notice that you're a federal employee, particularly those in the military. But they are almost in every single case willing to work with federal employees as long as they're not presently behind on payments. So I would tell your family members they need to be proactive right now, making sure that landlords, banks, anybody they owe money to understands what's going on. And eventually they will get paid. Now, I want to save you all some money if you need a computer by going to Vision Computers. You go to 404-COMPUTE or visioncomputers.com. 404-COMPUTE or visioncomputers.com, and you can let them build you a new computer, upgrade your existing computer, make you Windows 11 compliant. You know, Windows 10 ceases updates for security on October 14th. Easy for me to remember because it's my anniversary. October 14th, you get no more security patches for Windows 10. You got to be Windows 11 compliant to stay up to date on security, viruses, and patches to avoid hacks and malware, things like that. Vision Computer can bring you up to speed and up to date. All you have to do is reach out to them at 404-COMPUTE, anybody nationwide. Tell them I sent you, 404-COMPUTE or visioncomputers.com. If you tell them I sent you, you may save a little extra money. They're really good people. If you need managed IT for your office, they can save you money there. And your employees don't get an AI chatbot to deal with. They get an actual human being, which makes them more efficient, keeps them focused on their job while Vision Computer is focused on your computers. Call them at 404-COMPUTE or go to visioncomputers.com. Let them build your computer. Let them be managed IT. Let them get you Windows 11 compliant. 404-COMPUTE or visioncomputers.com. Tell them Eric sent you. In business, they say you can have better, cheaper, or faster, but you can only pick 2. What if you could have all 3 at the same time? That's exactly what Cohere, Thomson Reuters, and Specialized Bikes have since they've upgraded to the next generation of the cloud. Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, OCI is the blazing fast platform for your infrastructure, database, application development, and AI needs, where you can run any workload in a high availability, consistently high performance environment and spend less than you would with other clouds. How's it faster? OCI's block storage gives you more operations per second. Cheaper? OCI costs up to 50% less for compute, 70% less for storage, and 80% less for networking. Better? In test after test, OCI customers report lower latency and higher bandwidth versus other clouds. This is the cloud built for AI and for all your biggest workloads. Right now, with zero commitment, try OCI for free. Head to oracle.com/Erickson, ERICKSON. That's oracle.com/Erickson. Hello there. It is Eric Erickson here. The phone number is 877-973-7425. Let me go to the phones to Pamela, who's been waiting patiently. Welcome to the show. How are you?
Hi, Eric. Good afternoon. Wanted to run something by you. Appreciate that information you just gave on how Marjorie Taylor Greene is using Trump's lame duck situation to her advantage. And it's interesting because, a year ago, she was his golden girl, and they were best friends. Every picture he was in, she was in, at his golf course charities, et cetera, but now she's taken a complete, I'd say not 360, maybe 180, because she's still kissing up to him in some ways. As I was reading in several articles, but it's funny how she's now voicing her disgust in the Epstein files, although it wasn't really voiced and putting Trump in the hot seat, although many of them are, as far as Massey and all the others, trying to wait on that one more person to come into Congress, I believe, to actually get those 217 votes to get these Epstein files passed. But I was running this by your producer. I just read, it was about maybe 4 or 5 weeks ago, Marjorie Taylor is disgusted because she said nothing gets done in this Republican Party, even, of course, in her party, the Republican Party. She said they're a bunch of good old boys, and this good old boy network, I assume it's even in her hometown because she was mentioning even in Georgia. She said nothing ever gets done, and she said, I'm tired of it. So she was basically going to separate herself from the Republican Party. Do you think that's why she's now using this information and turning it around so she can get back in the ball game and long term?
I do wonder if she wants to try to strut her stuff and declare herself as an independent. And not really be tied to the Republican Party. She's mentioned the good old boy network before, and so I might as well.
She's right about that.
Well, yeah, but also Marjorie takes some things personally she shouldn't. So, for example, was talking to one of her colleagues within the Georgia delegation who was saying that they decided that they would all decide one way or the other whether they were going to run for the Senate seat. And they have a group chat. And that they were going to get together and they were going to say, no harm, no foul. If multiple ones wanted, let's just all acknowledge we want to run or not. And so Buddy Carter said he was going to run. Mike Collins said he was going to run. And about that time, the president put the pressure on Marjorie not to run. And she apparently blew up and said it was all sexism and they were keeping her out because she was a girl and on and on and on. And the member of the delegation I spoke to said, no, it's because she can't win and we want to beat Ossoff. She's too radioactive and she can't acknowledge that she's made herself too radioactive. So instead what she does is says, well, it's the good old boys shutting me up. It's the good old boys marginalizing me. And it's not true at all. And I'm sorry. I have very little respect for people who their first pivot is to it's racism if they're non-white and something doesn't go their way. And I have very little respect for women whose first pivot is, well, it's because they're sexist or misogynist. Sometimes it's actually you. And when it's such a cudgel for you to use to say something's racist or something's sexist or misogynistic or it's the good old boys club, that's actually on you. When your first defensive reaction to when something doesn't go your way is it's not me, it's them. I think you got problems. And that, unfortunately, is Marjorie's situation where Marjorie too often decides that It's not her. There are no consequences for anything she's done. She's never had to deal with the consequences of her own mistakes. She can blame sexism and the good old boy network or people betraying MAGA. It's always with her someone else's fault. Now, you should know something about me when I say this. In all candor and self-reflection, I typically blame myself for everything. If something doesn't go right, it's probably my fault. And I probably oftentimes blame myself when I should probably look to blame other people. But I think it's when you're always blaming other people and it's never, ever your fault for stuff, you got a real problem. And Marjorie, I think in that regard, has that problem in that she's never, ever wanted to acknowledge her mistake. It's always sexism. It's always misogyny. It's always the good old boys. It's always somebody else. It's never her. And the reality is the president and the governor of Georgia do not exactly get along. And one of the very few things they could agree on is Marjorie Taylor Greene getting into the Senate race would possibly help Jon Ossoff get reelected. Marjorie has very high name recognition against Republicans. In fact, if Marjorie were to get into the race, she would immediately be the front runner because of her high name ID. But when you actually poll the voters of Georgia, she's the one candidate in Georgia who in the general election right now today, Jon Ossoff is over 50% support. Jon Ossoff, the incumbent senator from Georgia, when you poll him against any of the Republicans in the races, including Derek Dooley, who no one really knows, he can't hit 50%. You poll him against Marjorie Taylor Greene, he gets well over 50% of the vote. That's how alienating she is to people. But in her mind, they kept her out of the race because it's sexism, it's misogyny, it's the good old boy network. No, it's because she's too radioactive of a candidate, and she's done it to herself. And perhaps her break with Trump is to try to rehabilitate her image to other voters, but she's not rehabilitating her image. She's becoming the Cynthia McKinney of Georgia. Now, I got to pivot to something else. And y'all are going to get mad at me on this one because it is my job to tell you reality. And we have gone through 4 years of Democrats refusing to acknowledge reality. And now suddenly we're my side doesn't want to acknowledge reality. And I'm the bad guy for piercing your bubble and telling you what reality is. The Bureau of Labor Statistics is closed. We're not going to have jobs data on Friday from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And the individual that Donald Trump decided to appoint to chair the Bureau of Labor Statistics has been withdrawn from Senate confirmation because he couldn't get the votes of Republican senators. So it is an institution with a bureaucratic leadership right now with no political accountability, and it can't do anything because it's closed down. So what's happening is private companies are coming out with their own data. And the data is not, for all of the faults of the Bureau of Labor Statistics, it's considered pretty good data, even though it is constantly revised because of the way it's collected. It's a survey. The surveys are slow to come in, and they constantly adjust it over a series of months and then over a year period. ADP surveys its customers. If you use ADP, ADP uses your data to build a survey, and most companies use ADP for payroll. And ADP is saying that based on its data of the payroll that it processes every week, U.S. employers shed jobs last month. Bank of America is saying there are signs of rising unemployment and slowing job growth. The Carlyle Group, looking at companies in which it owns a stake, says overall growth has slid. Goldman Sachs says its measure of labor market tightness fell last month back to levels seen in 2015, indicating a tough landscape for those looking for jobs. Few companies are hiring. Manufacturing costs are up. I don't want to sound like a broken record, but I have to a degree. For those of you who are new here, you need to understand one of the effects of tariffs. You say, Erickson, you said prices are going to go up. Prices actually are going up. but they're not going up as much as they could because what the businesses have decided is that if the prices went up to absorb the full cost of the tariff, you couldn't buy what they're selling. It'd be too expensive for you. So what the businesses are doing is they're absorbing the cost of the tariffs. Ford Motor Company buys a massive amount of aluminum from a plant in New York. It's the number one customer. It makes sheet aluminum that can be pressed into pieces for Ford F-150s. The plant caught on fire, can't produce. Ford is now having to buy a lot of its sheet aluminum from foreign manufacturers, and so there's a 50% tariff. You can't buy a Ford F-150 if they jack up the price, so Ford is just not paying wages, not hiring, not paying increased wages, not hiring, and is not investing in its company in upgrades. So Ford, if it was going to upgrade a facility, it was going to be buying from other manufacturers for those upgrades. And now Ford can't buy from those manufacturers. Those manufacturers are out of business. And guess what? We're now seeing 4 consecutive months of decline in the manufacturing industry in America. Ironically, the tariffs were designed to stimulate manufacturing in the United States. And the third-party surveys of manufacturing in America are at 4-month-over-month decline in manufacturing. That's a warning sign there's something not right in the economy. Now, Republicans, if they play this right, they'll be able to blame the Democrats for the government shutdown. If we somehow slip into a recession, Republicans can blame the Democrats. Say the Democrats are the ones who kept the government shut down. But that'll actually be spin and maybe people will buy it. The reality is there's something going on with the economy. And there are some people, I got a buddy of mine, he's a financial advisor, and he is totally bought into the idea of economic cycles. And you have these cycles where the economy fires up and then slows down and you get a recession and then it fires up again. And I think he said to me it's like 18-year cycles or something. And we are in the point of time where we should be having an economic slowdown. The party in the White House typically gets blamed when the economy slows down. That's bad for the GOP unless they can hurry up and redistrict enough to make some really solid Republican seats in states. You know, Utah just got ordered to redistrict, and the Republicans are going to lose some of their safe seats. They'll still be mostly Republican seats, but that's going to hurt. California, of course, is trying to get its redistricting approved by voters. Texas has redistricted. But the GOP needs to go to the mat as rapidly as possible with Missouri and Indiana and Ohio and others and redistrict as best they can because it is the economy, stupid, at the end of the day. At the end of the day, voters may have voted for Donald Trump, they say, on cultural issues, but a lot of those cultural issues translated it from high grocery prices and inflation, and they were furious with the Democrats. It's the economy, stupid. It turns out, despite all the talk about people wanting to reinvigorate American manufacturing and repatriate jobs, the average American just wants cheap stuff. And if you repatriate all the manufacturing to this country, you can't get cheap stuff because the cost of living in this country is higher, the cost of manufacturing in this country is higher, and Americans want cheap stuff. That doesn't mean you have to make it in China. So one of the I think, strategic problems with the tariffs is that with tariffs on every country as opposed to just focused on China, it disincentivizes companies setting up new assembly lines in other countries. We should be friend-shoring, ally-shoring our manufacturing, making our companies get out of China. I'm going to spend some time in the next hour on China because there are some warning signs China is destabilizing rapidly. We could completely destabilize the Chinese economy if we encouraged our manufacturers to leave China and go elsewhere for manufacturing. But with tariffs everywhere, there's not as much of an incentive. And the American public is feeling prices at the grocery store. The saving grace right now is at the pump. Americans are not paying as much for gas. But beer prices are up because of the aluminum tariff. True story. Car prices are starting to go up. And when they don't raise prices, they're not reinvesting in companies. They're not paying higher wages. They're not hiring more people. And we're seeing the hiring slowdown that economists said we would get through the tariff policy. Because if a company can't raise the price of the good they sell to you, they have to take the money from elsewhere. And they're taking the money by simply not filling positions. All of this was predicted. What's so funny is that the people who are defending the tariffs really don't have a good answer for it when everything that we who said the tariffs would cause problems, all of those things are now happening. And they're like, no, it's not really happening. Let's just deny that it's happening, except we can see it's happening. Whoever sold the president the idea on tariffs, it's bad. Here's the saving thing for the president, though. The Supreme Court makes them unconstitutional. In January, they hear the case. Let's say the Supreme Court says the tariffs are unconstitutional. The markets are going to skyrocket. The tariffs will go away, and it'll help us with the economy. But the irony here is for the Democrats. The data suggests the tariffs are beginning to have a negative impact on the economy. The negative impact that all the economists said would happen in slow hirings, in no wage increases, limited reinvestment in companies. But the Democrats have shut down the government. If the president and the Republicans play it right, they can blame the Democrats. Politically, they can just blame the Democrats for the fallout of the shutdown, because we know economically the same economists who warned about the tariffs are the same ones who say that an economic shutdown reduces American GDP because it slows down businesses that have to deal with the government. So the president of the GOP just blamed the Democratic shutdown for a slowdown in the economy. Howdy, welcome. It is Eric Erickson here, 877-973-7425. Should you wish to be on the program. Y'all, I am genuinely fascinated by this. John Ellis has this daily email I get as part of show prep, and he finds some of the most interesting stories out there. This is a story about Doug Whitney, a scientific unicorn with potential to provide answers about one of the world's most devastating diseases. He has a rare mutation that guaranteed he would develop Alzheimer's disease in his late 40s or early 50s and would die within a decade. His mother and 9 of her 13 siblings developed Alzheimer's and died in the prime of their lives. So did his oldest brother and other relatives going back generations. It's the largest family in the United States known to have an Alzheimer's-causing mutation. Nobody in history has ever dodged the bullet, except for Doug Whitney. Something has shielded him from his genetic destiny, allowing him to escape Alzheimer's for at least 25 years longer than anyone expected. Scientists have no idea. So he has devoted himself to being a guinea pig for science. He has regularly been tested for 14 years. He's now 76 and still Alzheimer's free, and is letting scientists and doctors do every imaginable possible test to try to help find a cure for Alzheimer's. God bless that man. What a story that he's willing to do this. Now, let me tell you about Old Glory Bank. They were started by conservatives out in Oklahoma City, because they recognized the debanking trends around the country. They understood that as banks grow, shareholders buy shares in the banks, and progressive shareholders use their clout to get banks to stop dealing with conservatives. In particular, it was a way to target gun manufacturers, gun stores, gun dealers, things like that. So Old Glory Bank started, and they started to defy the debanking trends. They started as a conservative bank. They're still run by conservatives, but they're a bank for anyone, and you don't have to worry about debanking with Old Glory Bank. You don't have to worry about their politics making you ashamed to do business with them. If you go to oldglorybank.com/Eric today, you can sign up with Old Glory Bank. They'd love to have you as a customer at oldglorybank.com/Eric, oldglorybank.com/ERICK, oldglorybank.com/Eric.